Thanks, worship team. So whose son was that who was giving away mansions? Over here somewhere. You know, my phrase for the year, if you remember the last time I was here, is let it go. So I have to let go of my dreams of having a mansion in this life, maybe in the next, yeah? So will you join me in preparing our hearts together for this morning's meditation, taking a breath in and a breath out. And as you take your breath in, whisper to yourself, Jesus, open my heart. And as you exhale, whisper to yourself, help me love like you. So let's take in that breath. Jesus, open my heart. And exhale, help me love like you. I saw on Facebook the other day, yesterday as a matter of fact, a video that someone posted from Wellspring that some of you went to a volleyball game. Was that Friday night? Was that when they won in 4 sets? And the last set was like 36-34, something like that. It was exciting, huh? Yeah. Well, last night, Ben and his girlfriend Faith and I went to the UH men's basketball game. Kind of a different ending. And what was really sad was it was senior night. Yeah? So I know the guys were really bummed. I mean, we were bummed for them, you know, that they lost. But there's nothing like being in Hawaii and experiencing senior night or graduation. Yeah? There's nothing like it anywhere in this world, I don't think, with all the leis. And the leis are varied now. It's not just floral leis. They got haku leis for the head. They've got candy. Some people make money. I like those leis a lot, you know. But one thing I noticed last night, so this team is made up of players from all over. There's one player from France in this senior class. He's from France. Toomey, I think his name is. There are 2 players from the state of Utah. There's a player from North Carolina. And there's also a player from Australia. And you could tell when they were walking out of the tunnel and as they were being cheered that they were overcome and overwhelmed by emotion. And of course, it's their last game here in Hawaii, you know, to play on the basketball team. But I think they were overwhelmed by the sense that they had been embraced. They had been welcomed into this culture. And I think it meant something to them that they were welcomed like that and greeted so warmly by the people of Hawaii. There's nothing like it. When I was watching that last night, it made me think, that's the way the church should be, where people feel so embraced, so welcomed, you know, that you can be anybody you want to be in this church, in the church, but you're welcome. That no matter who you are, where you are, that God can change your life because you are received by the people of God. And that's sort of today's message. In fact, let's end right there. That's a good place to begin and end, I think. Yeah. Good try. Yeah. So last Sunday, Pastor Rebecca mentioned the spiral shape of Jesus' life. The spiral shape of Jesus' life. That was the last point. His life of coming downward, being lifted upward, and then his life being outward. It was a metaphor about the self-giving love of Jesus. And I want to continue in that metaphor this morning to talk about the self-giving love of Jesus and how we see it, how Jesus' life comes downward, he's lifted upward, and his love is shared outward. We are in a series from Philippians, and today my passage is from the 2nd chapter, verses 5 through 11. Let the same mind be in you that was in Christ Jesus, who though he existed in the form of God, did not regard equality with God as something to be grasped, but emptied himself, taking the form of a slave, assuming human likeness. And being found in appearance as a human, he humbled himself and became obedient to the point of death, even death on a cross. Therefore God exalted him even more highly and gave him the name that is above every other name, so that at the name given to Jesus every knee should bend in heaven and on earth and under the earth, and every tongue confess that Jesus Christ is Lord, to the glory of the Father. Now, many scholars believe that this particular chapter, this particular passage, was one of the earliest hymns that had been written in the Christian church, maybe written around 50 AD. And so scholars believe that Paul is actually quoting this hymn as he wrote this letter to the church in Philippi somewhere around 60 to 60 AD, so 10 to 12 years after this hymn was written. Now, early hymns of the first century were either sung or chanted, but they always expressed theology and doctrine. Now, theology and doctrine is all about what we think and believe about God, okay? In this particular hymn, you can see that Jesus' life as downward, upward, and outward. Downward in that he made a decision not to hold on to divine power, but instead give it up and become like us and to enter into our world of imperfections and chaos. Upward, that God would exalt Jesus not as a reward, but as a vindication of his life of obedience, of faith, and service, and for bringing the word of grace and love to the world. And outward in the life of service and ministry that Jesus had here on the earth. And it was a very short life, as you remember, 30 some odd years. What this hymn affirms is that God chose to be among us. And unlike earthly powers who rule to dominate, God and Jesus lived among us and lives among us now in the Spirit with a life-giving love that is revealed in his humility, his empathy, and his inclusive nature. Philippians tells us all that we need to know about the theology of God. These things, humility, empathy, inclusion, they are the very nature of God. And we see it best in the life of Jesus. Pastor Rebecca mentioned Lydia last week. Now, that reminds me, today is actually International Women's Day. Did you know that? Yeah. So we want to celebrate all the women in our midst. Right? But we also want to keep praying for the women in the world who are caught in abusive relationships, who may be being trafficked, who are being abused in some way. But we want to lift up and empower the women in our midst and all over the world. Anyway, going back to Lydia, she was likely one of the few wealthy persons in the church, one of the few wealthy persons in the church in Philippi because of her business. She had a business in expensive purple dye and cloth. She may have been one of the first Gentile or non-Jewish converts to the Christian faith in that city. And she may also have been a leader. In fact, we think she was a leader in the church. But unlike Lydia, most of the church in Philippi was made up of working-class people and formerly enslaved people, people who were nearly invisible and on the margins of society. But unlike other institutions of the day, that church in Philippi actually had female leaders, like I said, like Lydia. That was unheard of. Like one commentator I read wrote, it was a socially mixed but mostly non-elite community. It was a socially mixed but mostly non-elite community. By worldly standard, that sounds insulting. But by the measure of God, it's a compliment. In Paul's day, humility was seen as weakness or in shame. But in God's eyes, humility was strength. Now, when you come from humble backgrounds, you can appreciate hearing that God, in the form of Jesus, came to earth, left all things mighty and powerful to walk in your shoes. In a way, humility for the church, for most of the church in Philippi, it wasn't a spiritual virtue that they aspired to. It was something that they were already living. It was their daily reality. They were already living the life of humility that God actually chose to live when God stepped downward in Jesus toward humanity. And that is profoundly different than being forced downward like the people in the church at Philippi, the people in the Roman Empire, forced downward by the empire, the powerful elite, and they were sometimes forced into slavery. I appreciate how one scholar describes Jesus' humility, that he chose to be humble and vulnerable to live among us. It is as though when Jesus came to earth to live among us in human form, Jesus was saying to them and to us now, there is nowhere that you can go that I will not go to. There is nowhere that you can go that I will not go to. Reverend John Wimber was the founding pastor of what was called the Vineyard Church. Do you know the Vineyard Church? They came out with all these initial, what we call contemporary music way back when. And he was the founder of the church growth program at the Fuller Institute of Evangelism back in the 1970s. One of my friends this week reminded me of something that Pastor Wimber shared in a class at Fuller when we were students there. Reverend Wimber told the class that he had read a quotation by a Jewish novelist by the name of Isaac Singer, who wrote, "In my later life, I've learned there are only two things that really matter: to be genuinely interested in people and be kind. Kindness, I've discovered, is everything." Pastor Wimber, in contemplating these things, realized that in his life, I laugh because he sounds like me. He realized that in his life as a pastor, he subconsciously and sometimes even consciously was trying to impress people. He wanted people to walk away from a conversation with him thinking to themselves, wow, what a guy. Do some of you feel that way? But after reading Singer's quote, he wanted something different about himself. He wanted people to remember that after a conversation with him, as they were walking away from him, they would be thinking, wow, that guy was really interested in me. He asked me questions about my life. He cares about me. Jesus, coming down in humility, did say and continues to say to us, I'm interested in you. I care about you. I love you. Our faith isn't about self-glorification, but it's about lifting others into the light and into the grace of God's care and compassion. Jesus coming and walking with us and walking in our shoes not only embodied humility, but empathy as well. I want to say, unfortunately, empathy has been receiving some bad press recently. In some circles of the Christian church, they've labeled caring for immigrants as toxic empathy. Have you heard that? In some Christian circles, they have labeled caring for immigrants as toxic empathy. They call it toxic empathy because in their minds, to emphasize compassion for immigrants is to neglect our laws. Now, we all have differing opinions about immigration, and that's okay. It's okay to have differing opinions. But I have to say that I have a hard time with the idea that empathy or compassion and seeking fairness for others, especially seeking fairness for immigrants, can be toxic. in any way. I can't wrap my mind around that at all. So let me try to illustrate empathy with this model that I learned from Stephen Ministry training. It's called the mud hole illustration. First of all, anyone hear about Stephen Ministry? Thank you, Daisy. One hand up. That's better than none. Well, in short, Stephen Ministry is a training program where they train lay people how to care for others on a one-on-one relationship. It's a beautiful program. Now, in this illustration, this is about caring for people. And I first drew the illustrations as I saw them in the module with stick figures. But I'm not an artist, and my stick figures really look bad. Yeah, I mean, even stick figures look really bad when I do. So I asked Faith, Ben's girlfriend, if she could create these slides for me. So you'll see how much more beautiful they are than anything that I could ask. In Stephen Ministry training, as much as like Pastor Rebecca mentioned last week, caring should not be one direction, not just in one direction, but it's about having balance, about caring for others while at the same time making sure that your own soul, your own life is being cared for as well. So let's look at the first slide. This is called sympathy. Now, if you come across someone who's fallen into a mud hole, there are ways of approaching that person. Sympathy, is it up there? Oh, is it coming up? It's not coming up. Okay. Anyway, it looks like this. You come to a mud hole and you see a person injured in the mud hole, and you're standing above them and you're looking down and you're saying to them, "Oh, that looks terrible. Oh, I'm sorry you're in that position. I'll pray for you." Now, there's nothing wrong with saying to a person, "I'll pray for you." But oftentimes when we say that, we walk away and we forget. I mean, maybe you don't, but I often do. So sympathy is more like, you feel something, but you kind of keep an emotional and physical distance. That is sympathy. In the second illustration, of course it's not up there, it's over-identification. Over-identification. So you come to the person who's stuck in the mud hole and you jump in, but you got nothing to pull you back up. And you've got no strength really to pull that person back up either. But you're so identified with that person's pain, you jump right in there and you say something like, "Oh, that reminds me of the time that and it becomes all about you. And you forget that you're there to actually help the other person. There's no objectivity. You struggle to be supportive. You struggle to be helpful. There it is. Over-identification. You're stuck in the mud hole too. In our third illustration, it is empathy. Empathy. Do we have that one? We do somewhere, okay. So anyway, empathy. Okay, I have to, okay. All right, but I cannot jump because I have no strength. So you come to the mud hole, and you see the person injured in the mud hole. But rather than just standing there or jumping all the way in, you tie a rope around yourself, and on the other end, you tie it to the tree that's up there on the top of the mud hole. And then you slowly climb down into the mud hole. And then you extend a hand to help the person up, okay? But you have this rope tied to something very strong. And that tree and that rope can actually symbolize the hope that you have in God, the strength that you have in God. Empathy is coming alongside and letting the person know you understand. You understand what they're experiencing and you want to be there for them. Now, some people really have the gift and the ability to be empathetic. For some of us, and I include myself in this, we have to learn to be empathetic. We have to learn to be active listeners. That's the key about empathy, being an active listener, listening not just with your ears, but with your heart as well. We can learn. We can learn to be empathetic, to be there with someone in their pain without trying to fix it. My problem is that when I'm with a person, half the time they're talking to me, in my mind, I'm already thinking of ways to help them fix it. That's not empathy. That's not empathy. You got to empty your mind and hear what they're saying. So let me make one suggestion for us to practice humility and empathy. Think of one person in your circle of friends or acquaintances who may be struggling right now. How might you express genuine interest and kindness in their concerns? How might you express genuine interest and kindness in their concerns? I've been enrolled in an intensive physical therapy program that Chris Arita, who's a member of this church, encouraged me to investigate. So on Friday, I just completed my 6th week out of 12 weeks. It's 3 days a week. Oh, thank you. So it's 3 days a week, 1.5 hours to sometimes an hour and 45 minutes of exercise. It's pretty rigorous. Usually my therapist will show me the exercise that she wants me to do. By the way, she's a student actually at the University of Hawaii in the kinesiology department. She's going to graduate this coming May. Anyway, so she usually shows me the exercise. But this last Friday, she told me all the exercises we were going to do. She was going to do it with me. She was going to do it with me. At first I thought, hey, you don't need to do that, but she did. And you know what's really interesting? It didn't take my pain away. In fact, it increased my pain. And because I was really sore after the exercises. But by stepping downward and being with me, the therapist, that young woman, let me know. Her name is Kayla, by the way. I want to acknowledge her. She let me know that I'm not alone. I'm not alone in this journey. And that's really helpful. You know, we can't always alleviate another person's pain, but one thing we can do is we can be there. We can be there with them, letting them know that they are never alone. Why did Jesus let go of power and privilege? And what did Jesus use his power for? It was all about a self-giving, self-sacrificing love to create a world where we would care about each other, where we would care about each other. You know, power in this world is meant to exalt an elite few and create a distance between those who have and those who have not, which leads me to my final thought. In Philippians, the chapter 2, verses 10 and 11, it says, so that at the name of Jesus every knee should bend in heaven and on earth and under the earth, and every tongue confess that Jesus Christ is Lord, to the glory of God the Father. So we worship a God who descends into this world, who stands in solidarity with humanity, with all of us. And we glorify our God, when we worship, when we truly exalt Jesus, and we truly exalt Jesus when we extend to the world the same self-giving love that Jesus gave. We glorify God by not claiming ourselves better than anyone else, but instead we extend God's love and God's mercy and God's compassion, and by welcoming others who are not like ourselves into our company. From the years 361 to 363 AD, Julian, what an interesting name, Julian was the emperor of the Roman Empire. Now, Julian was actually raised a Christian. He was raised during the period of Constantine. You remember Constantine the emperor? Constantine was a convert to Christian faith, but he uses Christianity. You got to read about Constantine because his Christianity was a little different. It was more of a power trip than anything else. Anyway, so Julian was raised during the time of Constantine's rule, and he rejected the faith. He rejected Christianity, but instead wanted to promote the traditional Greco-Roman religion. And so because he left the Christian faith, Christians started to refer to him as Julian the Apostate. Julian the Apostate. Now, Julian labeled the Christians and the Christian church as impious Galileans. Is that up there? Impious Galileans. Impious because they refused to burn incense or to bring sacrifices to the pantheon of gods in that religion, but instead only worshiping one God. Julian thought that they were impotent because they only had one God, whereas he had many gods. And he referred to them as Galileans, implying that they were just some religious or regional cult, a regional cult. He believed that Christianity, in his own words, was a corrupting influence in society. But there was one thing that Julian admired about the Christians, and something that he couldn't completely wrap his mind around. It was about how much they cared for the poor, the destitute, and the stranger. They practiced compassion and charity, while his own pagan temples did nothing close. One of the things he said was, the impious Galileans support not only their own poor, but ours as well. Now, the early church, including the one in Philippi, had a fierce and radical sacrificial love about them, seen nowhere else in the empire. It was marked by a radically inclusive generosity. Their humility and their empathy, their compassion and welcoming spirit was tangible in everything that they did. That Jesus was and is the ultimate authority, and not empires and not emperors or want to be kings. It means that we follow someone who leads by example, who is in the trenches, so to speak, with us. Not someone who uses his power to dominate or to take advantage of us. We follow a leader who chooses not to separate us into the elite and the non-elite, those who have and those who have not. We follow a leader who encourages us by his very example to be humble, to be empathetic, to be kind, to be generous, and to be inclusive in our spirits. We glorify a God who welcomes the brokenhearted, the stranger, the alien, the immigrant. And we, the Church of Jesus Christ, are asked to do the very same. To close, I'd like you to listen to this song that I've really loved the first time I heard it. It's called Be Humble, and it's done by a group called Risen Tunes. This song will be on the monitors, hopefully, so you can see the words and hear the melody as well. May God bless you and encourage you to be humble, to be humble.
When the world says I should rise, be the best, don't compromise. Sometimes I chase the things that fade and forget the one who gave me grace. But you whisper in the quiet place, child, you loved, you don't need to raise. Teach my heart to be humble, Lord, to seek your Less of me and more of you. That's the life I wanna pursue. In my weakness, you are strong. Make your wisdom be my song. Teach my heart to be humble. It's so easy to compare, counting likes and who was there. But your love reminds my soul, my worth in you makes me whole. So I'll bow before your name and give you glory, not my fame. Teach my heart to be humble, Lord, to seek your truth above reward. Less of me and more of you. That's the life I wanna pursue. In my weakness, you are strong. Make your wisdom be my song. Teach my heart to be humble. When pride starts rising in my chest, let your spirit bring me rest. You alone deserve it all. Every victory, big or small. Teach my heart to be humble, Lord, to seek your truth above reward. Less of me and more of you. That's the life I wanna pursue. In my weakness, you are strong. Make your wisdom be my song. Teach my